Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the blinding white of the Arctic tundra, where the sun is a relentless glare on snow that stretches as far as the eye can see. You're trudging across this landscape, now boots, crunching into snowdrifts that swallow your legs up to the knees, and every inch of exposed skin burns with the sharp bite of the cold. The wind howls past your ears, and the light burns your eyes, stabbing like knives with every glance across the dazzling expanse. You squint, you blink, you try shading your face with a gloved hand, but nothing helps. Your eyelids feel like they're being sandpapered from the inside, tears well up and freeze on your lashes, and you wonder how anyone could survive out here for long. The truth is, you probably wouldn't last a day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from? And what time is it right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink again, trying to clear the fuzz from your vision, but the snow glare is unrelenting. This, my friend, is snow blindness, an ancient and very real danger for anyone spending time in the Arctic. It's caused by the reflection of the sun's ultraviolet rays off the snow, which acts like a giant mirror. Imagine being caught in a field of white mirrors stretching in every direction, bouncing sunlight into your eyes from below, above and all around. You can feel the burn, even with your eyes closed, a tingling, almost like a sunburn on your eyeballs. The Inuit people, brilliant problem solvers of the North, knew this danger all too well. They didn't just hunker down and hope for cloudy days. They found a solution in the most unexpected of places: bone. Yes, bone. Carved from walrus tusks, caribou antlers, or even driftwood washed up from faraway shores. These snow goggles, also called ilgak or igak, in some Inuit dialects, were their answer to the blinding sun. Imagine holding a piece of polished bone, carefully carved into a slim curved band that hugs the shape of your face. Across its width, two narrow slits allow just enough light through to see, while filtering out the dangerous UV rays. The design is so simple you almost laugh when you think about it. No fancy lenses, no tinted glass, no high-tech coatings. Just slits. It's almost like someone decided to make a pair of tiny horizontal mail slots and strap them across their face. And yet it works. The brilliance lies in the minimalism. Historians still argue whether this counts as the earliest form of sunglasses. After all, there were no lenses involved, just those slits. Some say the principle of reducing light exposure by narrowing the field of vision is enough to claim that title. Others argue that sunglasses need lenses, or they aren't really sunglasses. Either way, you can't deny the ingenuity of the Inuit design. As you imagine yourself standing in the icy expanse, snow crunching under your boots, the wind tugging at your hood, and those slits of vision narrowing your world to a pair of dark, horizontal bands, you can almost feel the relief. The burning in your eyes eases. The glare dulls and shapes start to emerge from the whiteness again. A distant ridge, a patch of ice, the faint tracks of a seal. The world comes back into focus, one careful slit of light at a time. And you know what's funny? Even today, people who make replicas of these ancient snow goggles report the same thing: they really work. Sure, you look like a character from a post-apocalyptic snow survival movie, but your eyes are safe, and that's what counts out here in the land of blinding white. Now imagine standing there, your breath misting into the Arctic air, and in your hands is not some high-tech pair of polarized sunglasses, but a piece of bone, yes, bone, that has been shaped into something truly ingenious. The Inuit people, ever resourceful, found a use for what the land and sea provided, and that meant using bone antler and driftwood to create their snow goggles. You can picture it: the smooth curve of a walrus tusk, the slightly porous surface of a caribou antler, or a splintered piece of driftwood, bleached and battered by the sea. These raw materials, humble as they might seem, held the key to surviving the relentless glare of the Arctic sun. You pick up a scrap of bone, its weight, surprisingly light in your gloved hands, and you can almost feel the echoes of history humming through it. Here was a material that served so many purposes: tools, weapons, shelter supports, and now eye protection. The Inuit didn't just stumble upon this idea randomly. They were keen observers of their environment, and they understood how to work with what they had. Carving the bone into a wearable shape wasn't as simple as whittling a stick with a pocket knife. No, this was delicate work, especially in a climate where your fingers stiffened in the cold, and even the simplest task could turn into a battle against frostbite. They used small, sharpened tools made from stone or bone itself. Yes, bone, cutting bone, to shape the goggles. You can imagine the scene: a carver hunched in the low light of an igloo, working the bone carefully with a flint blade, scraping and smoothing, checking the curve by holding it up to the light, filtering in through a small hole in the wall. And here's a quirky tidbit: in some Inuit communities, the choice of bone or antler wasn't just practical, it carried a kind of quiet symbolism. Walrus tusk was prized for its durability, but also for its association with the powerful animal it came from. Wearing goggles made from walrus bone was like wearing a little piece of the animal's strength and resilience, a quiet nod to the deep connection between hunter and prey. Historians still debate whether certain designs or materials held ceremonial meanings beyond their practical use. Was a pair of antler goggles just a pair of antler goggles? Or did they say something about who you were, your family, your hunting skill, your place in the community? You run your fingers over the smooth, cool surface of the bone, tracing the edges where the slits will be cut, and you can almost hear the soft scrape of the tool as it shaves away thin curls of material. The smell of worked bone, faintly organic and earthy, drifts in the air. It's a scent that might seem out of place today, but for the Inuit, it was the smell of survival, of shaping the tools that would keep them alive in a landscape that could turn deadly in an instant. And let's not forget driftwood. In a land where trees are scarce and firewood is precious, driftwood that washes up on Arctic shores is a gift from the sea. Imagine a carver examining a gnarled piece of wood, turning it over in his hands, looking for a straight enough section to carve into goggles. The grain of the wood tells its own story. Maybe it once formed part of a ship's hull or a faraway forest tree, and now it finds new life as a pair of snow goggles that will shield someone's eyes from the searing glare. It's a reminder that out here, nothing goes to waste, and everything has a second purpose, if you know how to look at it the right way. As you trudge through the snow again, the bone goggles snug on your face, you feel a quiet sense of respect for the hands that made them. Every notch, every curve, every carefully carved slit is a testament to the skill and patience of generations past. And for a moment, you wonder how many pairs of goggles were shaped and reshaped over the centuries, each one a little different, a little better, a little more suited to the face it was meant for. And just when you think you got it all figured out, well, there's always more to learn and more to squint at under the Arctic sun. You got your bone goggles in hand, ready to face the Arctic glare. But here's the thing. You'll notice something funny when you finally slip them on. No glass, no tinted lenses, not even a scrap of animal hide stretched across a frame. Just two slender slits, barely wide enough for a trickle of light to sneak through. That's it. That's the whole design. Slits, not lenses. And yet it works. You slide the goggles onto your face, feel the smooth bone settle across your brow, and suddenly the world around you, once a chaotic sea of blinding white, narrows down into two neat, dark bands of vision. It's a bit like peering through the world's narrowest letterboxes. You blink, expecting to feel like a pirate with an eye patch on each eye, but instead the edges of the world soften, and your eyes relax into the darkness. No more squinting, no more tears freezing on your lashes. Just a quiet, focused field of view, letting in just enough light to see where you're going and no more. Here's the genius of it. By narrowing the field of vision, the slits drastically reduce the amount of light hitting your eyes. Think of it like squinting on purpose, but with the added bonus of not having to exhaust your facial muscles, doing it all day long. In fact, the principle behind these slits is the same as the modern concept of a pinhole camera. Limit the light, sharpen the image. There's even a quirky side effect. Some Inuit hunters reported that the slits actually improved their ability to focus on distant objects like seals resting on ice floes or caribou on the horizon. By cutting down the visual noise, the goggles helped them zero in on prey with surprising clarity. Historians still argue whether this design tweak was intentional or just a happy accident born out of necessity. Did they know? They were creating a kind of natural telephoto lens for the human eye, or did it just turn out that way? Because, well, survival demanded it. You glance around the snow, crunching under your boots, and the world feels different, more contained, more manageable. The slits make everything feel a little like an old silent film, where the edges fade away, and your eyes are guided only to what matters. And let's be honest, there's a quiet satisfaction in knowing you're wearing one of the oldest, simplest, and arguably most effective pieces of optical technology ever invented. Imagine a group of Inuit hunters sitting in a snow shelter, their faces half hidden behind the narrow slits of their goggles, nodding in approval as they inspect each other's handiwork. Maybe they joke about the newest pair in the village, carved from a particularly beautiful piece of walrus tusk. Or perhaps they tease a young hunter whose slits are too wide, letting in too much light, and now he's blinking like an owl caught in daylight. The goggle game is a serious one. Too wide and you're blinded. Too narrow and you can't see your prey. Finding that sweet spot takes skill practice and no small amount of trial and error. You can almost hear the crackle of conversation around a small oil lamp, the smell of seal fat burning gently in the corner, the soft shushing sound of a knife scraping bone, and the occasional burst of laughter as someone recalls the time they got so snowblind they tried to chase a shadow, only to run straight into a snowdrift. It's a reminder that even in the harshest environments, humans find ways to adapt and to share a laugh about it later. And of course, there's always that one person who tries to innovate. Picture someone experimenting with different slit shapes, maybe a triangle, instead of a straight line or a crisscross pattern for extra flair. Historians still debate whether such variations were practical improvements or just aesthetic flourishes, like someone deciding their snow goggles needed a little extra personality. Either way, the slits are the heart of the design, and you're starting to appreciate just how much thought went into these deceptively simple tools. As you walk on your breath, fogging in the cold air, you feel a small sense of wonder. Slits instead of lenses. Who would have thought? The sun hangs low in the Arctic sky, a lazy golden orb that never seems to rise fully or set completely. It just hovers there, like a sleepy neighbor who refuses to leave the party, casting long shadows and turning the snow into a shimmering expanse of endless light. You glance up, bone goggles snug on your face, and realize that this is no ordinary sunlight. It's a kind of sideways, all day, all night light that's both beautiful and brutal. In the Arctic, the sun does strange things. It circles the horizon in the summer, dipping low, but never fully disappearing, and in the winter, it hides away for months at a time. But when it's out, oh, it's out. The glare is relentless, bouncing off the snow and ice in ways that can leave your retinas screaming for mercy. You're not just dealing with the sun itself, you're battling its reflection from the ground beneath your feet. Imagine walking on a giant mirror day after day and trying to shield your eyes from the blinding rays that seem to come from everywhere at once. The Inuit knew this challenge intimately. They didn't just throw on a pair of goggles when the sun popped out for a few hours. They wore them as a daily necessity during long stretches of the year when the sun refused to behave like a proper, well-mannered celestial body. You can almost feel the ache in your eyes if you try to go without them, the constant squinting, the headaches that build behind your temples, and the sheer exhaustion of trying to see when the whole world feels like it's glowing. And it wasn't just the sun's brightness that caused trouble. The cold, dry air of the Arctic could make your eyes feel like they were lined with sandpaper. The wind whipping across the tundra carried tiny ice crystals that could sting like glass. Every blink felt like scraping your eyelids over a bed of thorns. Without protection, your eyes weren't just at risk of sun damage. They could dry out, freeze, and even become inflamed in a painful condition known as snow blindness. Snow blindness is no joke. It can sneak up on you after hours of exposure, and by the time you realize something's wrong, it's too late. Your vision blurs. Your eyes water uncontrollably, and every blink feels like fire. In severe cases, people have been temporarily blinded for days, left unable to hunt, travel, or even see their own hands in front of their face. And here's a quirky little fact. Snow blindness was such a known hazard that some Inuit stories warned of the eye spirit's invisible forces that could steal your sight if you didn't respect the sun. Historians still argue whether these tales were purely metaphorical warning children to wear their goggles, or if they reflected a deeper spiritual belief in the connection between the natural world and the human body. Either way, the message was clear: protect your eyes or the sun will take them from you. So you tighten the sinew straps of your goggles, grateful for the narrow slits that cut through the blinding light, and you keep moving. The sun may be stubborn, but so are you. The landscape shimmers like a sea of crushed diamonds, the air crackling with cold, and the light pressing against you from all sides. But you're ready for it now. You're wearing the wisdom of generations on your face, carved from bone and shaped by hands that knew the sun's dangerous dance all too well. You pause for a moment, listening to the distant howl of the wind, and feel a quiet sense of awe. The long, low sun may be beautiful, but it's not your friend, not without a good pair of goggles and a little respect for the forces that shape this land. You take a slow, deep breath, the cold air biting at your lungs, and press onward. The bone goggles sit snugly across your face, the slits cutting the world into thin bands of manageable light, and as you trudge across the snow, you begin to appreciate just how much work it must have taken to make these. Carving by hand with only the most basic tools, Now that's a task that demands patience, skill, and a whole lot of determination. You pause imagining the scene, an Inuit carver, sitting cross-legged in the low glow of an oil lamp, a scrap of antler or bone, held in one hand, a small stone blade in the other. The blade is chipped from flint, or chert, not exactly the sharpest tool by modern standards, but it gets the job done. Each scrape sends a curl of bone falling into the carver's lap, a tiny spiral that feels almost like a fossil of time itself. The carver works slowly, fingers stiff with cold breath, puffing in the frigid air. Every detail matters: the curve of the frame, the angle of the slits, the width of the band across the nose. A slip of the hand could ruin the whole piece, and with materials like walrus tusk or caribou antler in short supply, waste isn't an option. You imagine the carver's eyes narrowing in concentration, the tip of their tongue poking out in focus, because who among us hasn't done that while working on something fiddly? The hours tick by in that small space, maybe a snow house or a skin tent, and the carver stops now and then to hold the goggles up to the light, squinting through the slits to make sure they're even. Maybe they adjust the width by a hair's breadth or smooth down a rough edge that could dig into the skin. After a long day's hunting, it's meticulous work and not without risk, especially when you're working in a place where your fingers can go numb in minutes. Here's a curious tidbit. Some carvers would warm the bone slightly before shaping it using the heat from their own bodies or a small lamp to soften it just enough to make the cutting a little easier. But that heat had to be carefully managed. Too much, and the bone might crack. Historians still debate whether this warming technique was a common practice or just a clever trick picked up by a few particularly inventive artisans. And there's more. Sometimes the carvers would mark the bone with small notches or lines, tiny, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. Were these measurement guides, decoration, or perhaps a quiet signature left by the maker, a mark of pride in their work? The truth is, we don't know for sure. Some say they were practical guides for alignment, while others believe they were little artistic flourishes, a way of adding a bit of personal flair to an otherwise utilitarian object. As you hold your imaginary pair of goggles, you can almost feel the smooth edges where the carver's hands wore down the rough spots, the faint indentations left by hours of careful scraping. The slits are perfectly aligned, just wide enough to let you see the world without letting the sun blind you, and you feel a quiet admiration for the person who shaped them, someone who likely never thought of themselves as an artist, yet whose work shows a craftsman's care. And just imagine the scene when a carver finishes a pair. Maybe they hold them up, turn them in the firelight, and test them by looking across the snow. A nod of approval, a small smile, and the knowledge that these goggles could mean the difference between a successful hunt and a dangerous stumble into the unknown. You can almost hear the gentle teasing in the air, someone pointing out if the slits are uneven or joking that the last pair was better. But in the end, the goggles are ready, carved by hand, smooth by effort, and born of necessity. They're a small, almost humble piece of technology, yet they carry the weight of generations behind them. You adjust them on your face, feeling the cool touch of bone against your skin, and step out into the blinding light once more. The bone goggles are taking shape, but there's still a crucial step, making sure they actually fit your face. Out here in the Arctic, where a blizzard can slap you sideways and the wind has a bad habit of turning skin into ice sculptures, one size fits all just isn't going to cut it. These goggles aren't mass-produced. They're tailored almost like a bespoke suit, except instead of silk, And buttons, you've got sinew, bone, and a whole lot of practical know-how. You slip them on, and right away, you feel it too tight across the bridge of your nose, or maybe the slits don't quite align with your eyes. A little shift here, a careful carve there, and you're back in business. The Inuit made each pair of snow goggles to match the unique contours of the wearer's face. After all, no two faces are exactly the same. Your cheekbones might be higher, your nose a little broader, or your eyes set a fraction closer together. You picture an elder carver holding a newly shaped pair up to someone's face, squinting critically as they check the fit, maybe nodding or giving a small grunt of approval. Then a quick adjustment, maybe shaving down the sides for comfort, or widening the slits a hair's breadth to line up with the eyes. It's not just a functional step, it's a moment of trust between generations as knowledge of how to shape survival itself gets passed along. And here's a quirky detail: some Inuit would intentionally make the slits slightly off-center, or angled almost like a subtle pair of cat-eye sunglasses. Why, some scholars think it helped reduce glare from specific directions, especially when hunting at certain times of day. Others argue it was more of an aesthetic choice, like giving your goggles a little personality, because even when you're battling snow blindness, who says you can't look good doing it? Historians still argue over this and probably will for a while. Once the shape is perfected, the goggles need to sit snugly but comfortably against your face. That's where the careful shaping of the inner curve comes in. Too sharp, and the bone digs into your skin, leaving cold, angry marks after a long day. Too flat, and the goggles shift, letting in stray beams of sunlight that can fry your eyes like bacon under a broiler. There's a sweet spot, a gentle curve that hugs your face like a well-worn scarf. And it's not just about comfort. A proper fit ensures that no light sneaks in from the sides where the sun can be just as sneaky and dangerous. Think of it like blackout curtains for your eyes. If there's a gap, the whole system breaks down. That's why these goggles weren't just handed around the family. They were often carved for a specific person. Passed down, yes, but with careful adjustments. A bit of reshaping to suit the new wearer. You take a slow breath, feeling the bone against your skin, and it's surprisingly warm, almost as if the material has absorbed some of your body heat. That's no accident. Bone is a natural insulator, and the Inuit knew how to use it to their advantage. The smoothness helps prevent frost from building up, which is a small but crucial comfort when you're trudging across an icy wasteland at 20 below. And you might smile at this. Some old pairs of goggles have been found with little notches or patterns carved into the edges, almost like secret messages or quiet art. Did they serve a practical purpose? Maybe. Did they add a personal touch? Definitely. It's a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, people find ways to leave a little piece of themselves behind, whether in a pattern, on a pair of goggles, a song shared around a fire, or a quiet joke told while carving in the dark. So as you adjust the goggles once more, snugging them just right, you realize you're not just wearing a tool, you're wearing a piece of tradition, a story told in bone and sinew and careful craftsmanship. And out here in the blinding light of the Arctic sun, that story might just be what saves your eyes. The goggles snugly fitted to your face won't stay put without something to hold them in place. Enter sinew. Yes, the tendons of reindeer or caribou turned into string. It's not the sort of thing you'd expect to keep your eyewear in place. But in the Arctic, you work with what you've got. And sinew, surprisingly strong for its thin, fibrous form, is just the ticket for tying things up nice and tight. Imagine holding a length of sinew in your hands, feeling its slightly rough texture, a little stiff at first, but softening as you warm it up with your fingers. The Inuit would split sinew into thin strips, sometimes even twining it into a kind of string or thread. Once dried, it became a durable, flexible binding material, perfect for lashing together sled runners, repairing parkas, or in this case, keeping your snow goggles snug against your face while the wind howled and the snow swirled. You looped the sinew through small holes, carefully bored into the sides of the goggles, adjusting the fit so that the frame hugs your cheekbones without pinching. It's a delicate balance, tight enough to keep the goggles from slipping, but not so tight that they dig into your skin or leave you with a headache. You tie the ends in a simple knot, maybe a little frayed from use, and tug gently to test the tension. The goggles hold. Here's an odd little tidbit. In some cases, sinew ties weren't just left plain. Some Inuit would rub them with animal fat or oil to make them more flexible and prevent them from snapping in the cold. Others might add a simple bead or carving a tiny flourish of personality in an otherwise utilitarian object. Historians still debate whether these additions were purely functional, meant to add a little weight for balance, or if they were a subtle nod to style, a way of saying, yes, I made these goggles and they're mine. The sinew straps also allowed for quick adjustments. If you found yourself in a sudden storm wind, blasting like a freight train, you could tighten the ties to keep the goggles pressed snugly against your face, blocking out the snow and protecting your eyes. When the wind calmed down, you could loosen them, letting in a bit more air and avoiding that uncomfortable feeling of your skin being pinched beneath the frame. It's a simple system, but it works elegant in its practicality, a design refined over generations, and there's something quietly poetic about it, isn't there? The tendons of a reindeer, once part of a living, breathing animal, now stretched and shaped into a lifeline for the human who hunted it. The relationship between people and their environment, so often overlooked, is woven into every detail of these goggles. From the bone that frames your vision to the sinew that ties it all together. You reach up to adjust the straps, the sinew tightening gently against your skin, and you feel that ancient bond, a connection to countless hands that tied similar knots in years long past. Maybe you smile a little, imagining an Inuit hunter doing the same, squinting at the horizon through slitted goggles, the sinew holding steady as they scan the snow for a distant seal or the faint tracks of a caribou. So you walk on the sound of the wind, whispering in your ears, the crunch of your boots sinking into the snow, and the gentle tug of the sinew strap, reminding you that sometimes the simplest materials shaped by the right hands can be the difference between survival and blindness. With the goggles tied snug by sinew, you feel ready to face the Arctic glare. But there's one last step before you head out testing them. Because let's be honest out here, you can't just pop into a shop for a replacement if the slits are too wide or the fit's a little off. These goggles are your shield against a landscape that seems determined to burn your eyeballs out of your head. So how did the Inuit make sure their goggles worked well enough to survive a day in the snow? Simple, they tested them in the very environment they were made for. Picture an Inuit hunter stepping outside the shelter, pulling the goggles into place and squinting at the endless expanse of snow. The sky above is a pale washed out blue, and the snow glitters like crushed glass under the slanting rays of the sun. Every detail matters now. The hunter scans the horizon. Can they see the subtle dips where snow has drifted? the faint marks where an animal has passed, the slight glint of a seal's breathing hole. On the ice, if the slits are too narrow, the world shrinks to a tunnel. Hard to spot a seal's head, bobbing in a sea of white when you're peering through a gap, the width of a toothpick, too wide, and the sunlight slips in at the edges, turning the snow into a blinding sheet again. You can almost hear the muttered curses under the hunter's breath as they adjust the goggles, maybe scraping the slits a little wider with a sharp flake of stone or tightening the sinew straps with stiff gloved fingers. It's a balancing act, and every hunter has their own preferences. Some want a wider slit for more light, especially when the sun dips lower and the world goes dim. Others prefer the slit so narrow they can barely see straight ahead, but are protected from every angle. Historians still debate whether there were regional styles. Did coastal hunters favor a particular slit width, while inland families preferred another? The records are scattered, but oral histories hint at small, community-based traditions passed down through generations. And here's a quirky little thought. Imagine a young Inuit child slipping on a pair of goggles for the first time, peeking through the slits, with a giggle and marveling at how the world changes. The laughter of an elder gently teasing, "You'll get used to it, little one," as the child stumbles forward, unsure of where the edges of the world begin and end. It's a rite of passage, in a way, learning to see, not just with your eyes, but with the wisdom of those who came before you. Testing the goggles wasn't just about vision, though. It was also about comfort. You imagine standing still, feeling the cold air pressing against the bone, the straps snug against your skin. Do they sit right? Are they balanced? Or do they tilt and let in light at the edges? You tilt your head left, then right, adjusting feeling for any draft, any shift that could signal trouble. It's a quiet, methodical process, no rushing, no shortcuts, because out here, a small mistake can leave you half blind when you need your eyes the most. You think about the patience it takes in a world where so much depends on the weather, the ice, and the whims of the animals you hunt. There's a quiet power in taking your time to get something just right. The goggles aren't just a tool, they're a reflection of the person who wears them. And when you finally step out into the snowfield, goggles tested and adjusted, you feel the weight of that tradition on your face, a weight that's surprisingly light, but oh, so essential. You step out onto the snowfield, the glare muted by the bone slits, the sinews snug at the sides of your face, the cold air bites at your cheeks, and the world feels at once vast and sharply defined. Everything you wear has been shaped by this place, including your goggles. And as you trudge forward, the rest of your gear becomes part of the story too. The Inuit didn't just wear snow goggles, they wore them with something. Sealskin. Imagine it now, a full sealskin ensemble, the thick oiled hide stitched together into a parka that shrugs off snowflakes like a duck shedding water. The mittens stiff, yet supple, the boots, kamiks lined with moss or animal fur to keep your feet warm, and the hood edged with fur, framing your face like a halo of practicality. The goggles sit within that frame, completing the look in a way that feels both rugged and quietly dignified. Your breath steams in the cold air, the faint scent of tanned hide mixing with the crisp smell of ice and snow. Every piece of clothing has been crafted with care, stitched with sinew, softened with oil, tested in the brutal winds. The goggles aren't an afterthought. They're part of an integrated system of survival, a finishing touch to an outfit that's been tested over generations. And here's a little known detail some Inuit hunters would actually match: the shape of their goggles to the cut of their hoods. If the hood sat low and tight, the The goggles needed to fit snug within that space. If the hood flared wider, there was room for broader goggles. It's a small adjustment, but one that speaks to the seamless way the Inuit integrated their tools with their environment. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was. Some suggest it was a personal preference, while others argue it reflected regional styles and techniques passed down through families. As you walk, the sound of your boots crunching on the snow is muffled by the layers of sealskin. You hear only the low rasp of fabric against fabric, the occasional creak of a sinew strap, and the faint whisper of wind curling around you. The world feels softer, more contained. The bright glare of the snow no longer stings your eyes. Instead, it's filtered through the dark slits, giving the landscape a muted, almost dreamy quality. And here's a quirky little fact that might make you smile. Some Inuit would joke that their sealskin outfits made them look like walking bears, short rounded silhouettes, with fur bristling at the edges. It's easy to imagine a hunter shuffling across the ice, goggles in place, parka snug, and a companion, nudging them with a grin, saying, "Careful, you're starting to look like a polar bear." But there's a quiet beauty in it too. The way the snow goggles the sealskin clothing, the sinew ties, and the caribou mittens all work together. It's not just survival gear, it's a kind of Arctic fashion, honed by necessity, yes, but also by a sense of harmony with the world around you. You pause for a moment, taking in the vast white landscape, the low sun skimming the horizon, and you realize that every piece of your outfit, right down to the goggles on your face, has a story of adaptation, of quiet ingenuity, of learning from the land and from the ancestors who walked it before you. The goggles snug in place are more than just a tool. They're a symbol of a way of life that understands how to live, not in the Arctic, but with it. And as you take another step forward, you feel a small but growing sense of connection to that long, unbroken line of survival. As you walk further across the snowfield, the cold still biting at your cheeks, and the bone goggles snug across your face, you start to notice something you hadn't really thought about before. Those goggles aren't all business. They aren't just plain utilitarian slabs of bone slapped across your eyes like a pair of makeshift blinders. No, they have personality. They have style. You stop for a moment, catching your breath as you scan the horizon, and it strikes you. Some of the old goggles weren't just functional, they were decorated. Carved lines along the edges, small etchings, maybe a pattern of dots, or a wave-like design running across the top. Little flourishes, subtle and beautiful, that speak to a desire for expression, even in the harshest conditions. You wonder who carved them. A proud father crafting a pair for his son's first hunt. A grandmother making a set for her granddaughter, adding a small swirl at the edge as a sign of love. It's not just the carvings either. The bone itself could vary in color depending on the source. Walrus ivory might have a creamy, almost yellow hue, while antler could be more of a soft gray. Driftwood, when used, might be darker, weathered by the sea and smoothed by sand. Some pairs were polished to a soft sheen, while others were left rough, a little uneven, as if the maker cared more about function than finish. And then there's the occasional splash of color. Some Inuit would stain parts of the goggles with natural dyes, maybe a touch of ochre or a darkening from soot. Was it purely aesthetic, or did the color help reduce glare in certain conditions? Historians still argue about this, tossing theories back and forth, like a driftwood log caught in a river. You can't help but smile at the thought of an Inuit hunter showing off a new pair of goggles, turning them in the light to catch the carved patterns, maybe tilting their head a little as if to say, yeah, they're pretty nice, aren't they? It's easy to imagine a quiet competition brewing. Who has the best design, the cleanest slits, the smoothest finish? Even in the midst of survival, people find ways to make their tools theirs. There's even a quirky old story you might hear whispered in an igloo about a young carver who tried to make a pair of goggles shaped like a bird's wings, thinking it would help him see better in a storm. Did it work? Probably not. But did he become a bit of a local legend for his unusual taste? You bet he did. And let's not forget the goggles that were passed down through generations, heirlooms of a sort. You can almost picture an elder presenting a pair to a young hunter running a weathered finger along the carvings and saying, "These were your grandfather's. He hunted many seals with these. The weight of that history sits across the bridge of your nose, the smooth edges worn by the hands of those who came before." As you adjust the goggles on your face, feeling the faint ridges of decoration beneath your fingers, you realize that these aren't just tools. They're stories, they're history, they're small, wearable works of art that tell you who made them, who wore them, and how they faced the endless, blinding sun together. So you walk on the world, narrowed by the slits in your goggles. The light muted the cold, sharp against your cheeks, and you carry a little extra warmth in your heart. Because even in a landscape of snow and ice, someone took the time to make the goggles just a little bit beautiful. You trudge across the snow, the crunch of your boots, muffled by the thick, layered world of sealskin and sinew bone and fur. The slits in your goggles guide your vision, but a quiet thought keeps nagging at the edge of your mind. Were these the first sunglasses? It's a tempting idea, isn't it? The Inuit carving bone goggles with narrow slits to protect their eyes might have invented something that in a modern world we associate with glossy plastic frames and celebrity fashion shoots. You squint through the slits, imagining a parallel universe where a pair of ilgok sets on display in a sleek glass case at a designer boutique, a price tag dangling beneath original Polar edition. But the question is real, and scholars have been debating it for years. Do slitted bone goggles count as the earliest form of sunglasses, or does the lack of lenses disqualify them from that title? Historians still argue over the definition. Some say yes, these goggles serve the fundamental purpose of reducing sunlight and protecting the eyes, which is the essence of what sunglasses do. Others insist that true sunglasses must have lenses, glass or tinted material that alters the light passing through, not just the amount of it. You adjust the goggles on your face, feeling the smooth curve of bone pressing lightly against your temples, and wonder, does it matter? Labels aside, the concept is the same. Block the sun. Save your eyes. It's a solution born not from vanity, but from survival. And maybe that's the real innovation here, taking what's available and turning it into something that works, no matter what you call it. And here's a quirky little tidbit for you, some early European explorers who traveled to the Arctic in the 16th and 17th centuries stumbled upon Inuit snow goggles and were baffled. They marveled at the simple design and effectiveness, but often misunderstood their purpose, sometimes dismissing them as curious native trinkets rather than essential survival tools. Imagine their surprise when they tried walking across the ice without protection and promptly found themselves squinting in agony, their eyes watering uncontrollably, while the locals, quietly amused, went about their business, unfazed behind their slitted goggles. You can almost hear the quiet chuckle of an Inuit elder watching a shivering European, struggling to make sense of it, all offering a patient nod, as if to say, yes, the sun will eat your eyes if you let it. There's something deeply satisfying about the moment, the collision of worlds, the blending of ancient knowledge with newcomers' confusion. The snow goggles weren't flashy, but they were functional, beautiful in their simplicity, and quietly powerful in their effectiveness. They didn't need to be called sunglasses to prove their worth. As you continue your slow march across the ice, you realize that the slits in your goggles aren't just cutting down glare, they're focusing your attention. Your eyes feel more rested, your head clearer, your senses more attuned to the subtle shapes and shadows across the snow. It's a kind of enforced mindfulness, a narrowed field of vision that reminds you to look carefully, to pay attention to the small details that might otherwise get lost in the overwhelming expanse of white. And maybe that's the true genius of these early sunglasses. They don't just protect your eyes, they sharpen them too. They turn the blinding Arctic into something manageable, a place where you can survive, maybe even thrive, if you respect the land and learn from those who've walked it before. You take another step, the bone goggles firmly in place, and feel a quiet sense of gratitude for the hands that shaped them, whether they called them sunglasses or not. Your goggles feel solid against your face, a piece of bone, artfully curved, to match the unique shape of your brow and cheekbones. But let's say you're an Inuit hunter, and the walrus tusks have been scarce lately. The caribou aren't wandering near enough for easy harvesting. What do you do when bone isn't an option? Well, that's when you turn to the sea, because in the Arctic, the sea is always providing. Driftwood, it's almost like a gift, isn't it? A chunk of wood smoothed by waves, tossed ashore by currents that trace across entire continents, landing finally on your patch of icy beach like a message in a bottle. The Inuit didn't just see it as scrap, they saw potential, shaped by water, softened by sand, and waiting to be transformed. You can almost picture the scene, a hunter picking up a piece of driftwood, turning it over in his mittened hands, feeling the grain, the weight. The wood might be gray from salt and sun, or darkened from long journeys at sea. It might be cracked or pitted, but with careful shaping, it could become a new pair of goggles. A small, curved plank, hollowed and notched, just waiting for a skilled hand to carve the slits that would save a pair of tired eyes from the Arctic glare. And here's a fun little side note. Historians still argue about just how common driftwood goggles were. Some think they were an occasional improvisation used when bone was scarce. Others suggest certain coastal communities may have preferred driftwood for its lighter weight or for the way it weathered into smooth, workable shapes. Driftwood doesn't crack quite as easily in the cold. You see, which is a definite bonus when you're squinting into a blizzard and can't afford a sudden snap across the bridge of your nose. You hold the imaginary goggles in your hands, feeling the texture of the wood, maybe still faintly salty, maybe a little rougher than polished bone, but sturdy. The slits have been carved carefully, and the wood carries its own story. Who knows where it started? A tree in Siberia, maybe felled by a storm, drifting through icy waters, caught in a current bouncing along for months, maybe years, before it ended up in your hands ready to be shaped into something useful. That's the thing about living in the Arctic. You learn to see usefulness in everything. A piece of wood isn't just a piece of wood. It's a tool, a weapon, a piece of fuel for your lamp, a structural support for your shelter, or yes, a pair of snow goggles. And the Inuit, with their quiet, clever resourcefulness, saw this clearly. You imagine the soft sound of a carving tool, scraping across the wood, the faint smell of salt, and cold air, mingling with the scent of worked fibers. The goggles take shape slowly, patiently, as they always do. A little adjustment here, a careful smoothing there, the slits, carved to just the right width. a pair of sinew ties threaded through holes in the ends. The hunter holds them up to the dim Arctic light filtering through a sealskin window, tests the fit, and nods once. They're ready. So you put them on the driftwood light against your face, and you see the world, narrowed into slivers of light. The glare is softened, the details sharpened, and you walk forward, a little more prepared, a little more connected to the sea, to the land, and to the quiet ingenuity that turns a piece of wood into a lifeline. You've been trudging through the snow for a while now. The world softened into muted shapes by the slits in your goggles, the bones snug against your skin, the sinew straps, holding everything in place. And as you walk, you start to notice something unexpected. Your eyes feel sharper, like the world isn't just less blinding, but somehow clearer too. It's an odd effect, isn't it? Narrowing your field of vision should make things harder to see, not easier. And yet, those tiny slits are doing more than just blocking out the blinding glare. They're focusing your attention. It's as if the world itself has been cropped down to a manageable size, like you're looking at life through a carefully framed photograph. Here's the curious bit. Some Inuit hunters believed that the narrow slits in the goggles didn't just protect their eyes from the sun, they also helped them spot prey more effectively. It's almost like having a natural zoom lens, sharpening your focus on the subtle details that matter. The slight dip in the snow that marks a seal's breathing hole, the faint ripple of a caribou's fur against the white landscape, or the almost imperceptible shimmer of ice disturbed by a fox's paw. Historians still debate whether this was an intentional design feature or a happy accident. Did the Inuit know they were creating a kind of optical enhancement, or did it just turn out that way because necessity demanded it? Some argue that the improved focus is a side effect of limiting peripheral vision, forcing the eyes to concentrate on a narrower field. Others believe the design was intentional, passed down through generations, with quiet nods and small adjustments, the kind of wisdom that doesn't need to be written down. Because it's felt, you test it for yourself, squinting through the slits, scanning the horizon. The snow stretches out in every direction, a seemingly endless ocean of white. But with the goggles, you notice details you might have missed before a dark speck. Far away, the gentle curve of a drift, the faint tracks left by a hare bounding across the ice. Your mind relaxes into this focused state, your eyes no longer overwhelmed by the blinding brightness, able instead to pick out what really matters. And here's a little quirky tidbit for you. Some modern hunters and outdoor enthusiasts have tried wearing replicas of these Inuit snow goggles just to see how they compare to the latest high-tech gear. And you know what they've found? The slits really do help. Not only do they reduce glare, but they also make it easier to spot small movements in the distance. Something even fancy, polarized lenses don't always manage as well. You can almost imagine an Inuit hunter explaining this to a wide-eyed visitor from the south. You don't need a telescope out here. Just look through the slits and you'll see what you need to see. A quiet confidence born from centuries of experience. The snow crunches beneath your boots and you adjust the goggles on your face, grateful for their surprising side effect. They're not just a tool for survival. They're a tool for seeing the world differently. The slits don't limit you. They guide you. They focus you. They make the overwhelming landscape of ice and snow into something you can navigate, step by careful step. And as you keep walking, the sound of your breathing soft against the wind, you feel a little more connected to the wisdom of those who came before, those who carved slits into bone, not just to block out the sun, but to see. You walk a little further now, the cold seeping into your boots, the wind tugging at the edges of your hood. The snow goggles feel steady against your face, the slits offering a slim but safe view of the world ahead. But let's not get too confident, because even the best pair of goggles has its limits. Sure, they'll keep your eyes from frying in the blinding Arctic glare. They'll sharpen your focus and help you spot a seal's breathing hole from 50 paces. But when it comes to the other dangers out here, well, let's just say a pair of bone goggles isn't much good against a charging polar bear. You imagine the scene: you're trudging along, eyes narrowed through your slits, tracking the faint marks of a fox or the glint of a distant ice ridge. You're feeling pretty good until you hear the soft crunch of snow behind you, the unmistakable sound of something large, something breathing. You freeze. The wind whistles through the bone slits, and your breath catches in your throat. Slowly, you turn vision, still narrowed by the goggles, and there it is, a massive shape, all muscle and fur and teeth, staring right back at you. The goggles help you see it, sure, but they won't do a thing to stop it. That's when you realize the bone on your face is no match for the bone-crushing jaws of an apex predator. And here's the quirky part: some Inuit stories tell of hunters who survive polar bear encounters by sheer luck, or by offering a piece of blubber as a distraction. Others speak of amulets and charms, small carved figures or bone tokens worn alongside goggle believed to ward off harm. Historians still debate whether these charms were purely symbolic, or if they offered a real sense of psychological comfort, a reminder that you're part of a larger story connected to the spirits of the land and the ancestors who came before. You glance down at the goggles in your hands, turning them over slowly. They're beautifully carved, yes, but they're not a magic shield. They won't stop a blizzard from sweeping across the ice, or a crack in the floe from swallowing you whole, or a polar bear from deciding you look like a tasty snack. And yet, they do something. They protect your eyes, sharpen your vision, and remind you that in this harsh, beautiful world, survival is a matter of small, steady choices. Choosing the right materials, carving the slits just right, fitting them to your face, tying them with sinew, and knowing when to look and when to listen. You tighten the sinew straps, the wind pressing against your back, and take another step forward. The world feels a little less overwhelming with the goggles on, a little more manageable. The bone on your face may not stop the bear, but it's a piece of your armor just the same, a small, humble line of defense against the vastness of the Arctic. So you walk the snow, crunching beneath you, the bone snug against your skin, the slits guiding your gaze. And while the polar bear might be out there somewhere, for now, you're focused on the path ahead, on the glint of ice, the flicker of movement, the distant shimmer of something worth chasing. The wind picks up now, a sharp, needling cold that slides through your sealskin parka and pricks at your bones. Your fingers ache despite the mittens, and the snow seems to sneak into every crease and fold, piling in drifts against your boots. You keep going though, because in the Arctic, there's no such thing as waiting for the weather to calm down. You move or you freeze. Now imagine trying to carve snow goggles in these conditions. Your fingers are already stiff from the cold, clumsy from the layers of mittens and hide, and the bone you're working with is hard and unyielding. Every scrape of the blade is an act of willpower. Every notch, a small victory against the elements. You picture an Inuit carver hunched over a block of bone or antler snow, swirling around them like fine dust, their breath a steady stream of fog. The carver's fingers are red raw at the knuckles, but still moving slow, deliberate shaping the curve, shaving the slits. The blade in their hand is sharp, but primitive, maybe a fragment of stone or a chipped piece of metal from a long ago trade. It's a tool that needs care, just like the hands holding it. You might chuckle at this. There are stories of carvers pausing mid-work to warm their hands under their armpits, muttering curses in the stubborn cold, or even sticking a bit of bone in their mouth to soften it up with the heat of their breath. That's dedication, crafting survival tools, while fighting to keep your own fingers from freezing off. And here's a quirky little fact. Some carvers worked indoors, inside igloos, or skin tents to escape the worst of the wind. But that came with its own challenges. The light inside was dim, often just the flickering glow of a seal oil lamp, and the shadows could make it hard to see the fine details. Historians still argue whether carving indoors was better for precision, or whether the bright light outside, despite the cold, was worth the risk of numb fingers. Either way, it was a trade-off: comfort versus visibility, warmth versus accuracy. You run your thumb along the edge of your imaginary goggles, feeling the slight imperfections, the small dips where the blade slipped the faint ridges, where the scraper didn't smooth everything down. Each mark tells a story, a moment of inattention, a sudden gust of wind, a flurry of snow that forced the carver to pause. It's a quiet reminder that perfection is a luxury out here. What matters is good enough to survive. The cold seeps into your boots, numbing your toes, and you imagine what it must have been like to finish a pair of goggles in these conditions. Fingers trembling, eyes straining in the dim light, knowing that each notch could mean the difference between seeing and snow blindness. It's not glamorous work. It's gritty, raw, and absolutely necessary. You smile a little, adjusting the sinew ties, and think about the resilience it takes to carve something so small, so precise, while the wind howls and the snow stings your skin. It's a kind of quiet heroism, isn't it? The kind that doesn't make headlines, but keeps you alive when the Arctic shows its teeth. So you keep walking, the goggles pressed, snug against your face, the cold sharp in your lungs, and the sound of the wind in your ears. Each step is a reminder. Survival here isn't about brute strength. It's about patience, skill, and the steady, careful shaping of bone into something that can save your eyes and maybe your life. The cold gnaws at you, but you keep going. The goggles snug against your face shield your eyes from the glare, but they didn't make themselves. Someone had to carve them. Someone had to teach you how. And as you trudge across the snow, the thought drifts in. Who first showed you how to shape bone into something that lets you see? It's an image that warms you more than your layers of fur and hide. An elder sitting cross-legged on a sealskin, hunched over a piece of bone with a small blade in hand, showing you how to hold the tool just so. The gnarled fingers slow and precise, guiding yours. The careful tone of voice, explaining that the slits must be narrow enough to block the light, but wide enough to see the horizon. And the quiet, almost whispered warning, too wide and you'll lose your eyes to the sun. The knowledge isn't written down anywhere. It lives in the hands and the eyes, in the patient lessons passed from generation to generation. The bone you're holding isn't just a piece of survival gear. It's a living memory, shaped by ancestors who learned the hard way what happens when you face the Arctic sun unprepared. And here's a quirky detail for you. In some Inuit families, it wasn't just the men who carved the goggles. Women, too, passed down the knowledge, especially when it came to the finer points of fit and comfort. After all, they knew a thing or two about shaping materials, sewing parkas, cutting boots, softening skins. Historians still debate whether there were specific gender roles in goggle making or if it varied by region and family tradition. Some oral histories suggest that everyone was expected to know how to make them, just as everyone knew how to tie a proper knot or start a fire. Survival didn't discriminate. You can almost hear the voice of an elder now, teasing you gently when you mess up. Too much pressure on the blade, you'll snap it. Try again. Or perhaps a warm smile when you finally get it right. Good. Now you'll see the seal. Before it sees you, there's a quiet rhythm to the knowledge sharing, a back and forth of patience and practice mistakes and small victories. The elder shows you how to shape the curve of the goggles, to match the planes of your face, how to smooth the edges so they don't cut into your skin, how to drill the tiny holes for the sinew ties without cracking the bone. It's a long, careful process, no rushing. You sit together in the dim light, maybe in the flickering glow of a seal oil lamp, the smell of tanned hide and bone shavings in the air, the soft scrape of the blade against the bone, the occasional crackle from the lamp. You think about how many times these lessons have been taught, generation after generation, the knowledge carried forward, not because it's written in a book, but because it's held in the hands, in the slow, careful work of shaping survival. So you adjust the goggles on your face, feeling the curve, settle perfectly across your cheekbones, and take another step into the snow. You're not just wearing bone, you're wearing the wisdom of those who came before you. And in a place where the sun can steal your vision, that wisdom is worth more than gold. The snow crunches softly beneath your boots, a rhythmic sound that almost lulls you into a trance as you walk. The wind whispers past your ears, and the goggles, those carefully shaped slits of bone, shield your eyes from the blinding glare. But as you walk, you wonder, how did children learn to wear these things? Did little ones stumble around with goggles, too big for their tiny faces, tripping over their own boots in the snow? You smile at the thought, because of course learning to use snow goggles wasn't an instant skill. It was a process. From the moment a child could toddle across the packed snow, there were lessons to be learned. The elders watched closely, showing the little ones how to slip on the goggles, how to adjust the sinew straps without tugging too hard, how to squint through the slits and make sense of the world turned into narrow bands of light. You picture it, a child bundled in sealskin, awkwardly fidgeting with a pair of miniature goggles. The bone frame just a little too big, the slits just a touch too wide. Maybe they giggle as they peer through the slits, the world looking strange and new. Maybe they stumble into a snowdrift, falling with a soft flump, and the adults chuckle softly, helping them up, brushing off the snow. Here's a quirky detail you might not expect in some Inuit communities. It wasn't uncommon for children's goggles to be carved with extra care, sometimes with playful patterns or small decorations, tiny marks that made them feel special. A star shape scratched lightly at the corner, or a swirl that echoed the pattern on a parent's pair. It was a way of saying, "These are yours. You belong here. You're part of this world, and we'll teach you how to see it safely." And learning didn't stop at just wearing the goggles. The children learned how to care for them, how to keep the bone from cracking in the cold, how to smooth a scratch with a piece of sandstone, how to tighten the sinew without fraying it. Historians still debate how much of this knowledge was taught formally and how much was picked up by simply watching, by sitting quietly and absorbing the lessons through repetition and quiet practice. You imagine a small gathering inside an igloo, the air warm and close, the smell of tanned hide mingling with the faint scent of a seal oil lamp burning low. An elder carves a new pair of goggles, their hands steady despite the cold, while a child leans close, wide-eyed asking questions in a voice barely above a whisper. Why do the slits go here? How do you make them so smooth? Can I try? The answers come not in long lectures, but in quiet demonstrations. A nod here, a slight shake of the head there. A guiding hand over small fingers holding a blade, showing how to press, just enough to shape the bone without snapping it. It's a kind of knowledge that seeps into you slowly, like warmth from a fire. Before you know it, you've learned not just how to use the goggles, but how to make them, how to see the world, not as a blinding expanse of snow, but as a place of subtle textures, faint tracks and distant shapes, shimmering on the horizon. You take a slow breath, the air sharpen your lungs, and feel a quiet gratitude for the generations who taught their children how to see, not just through bone slits, but through the lens of survival, of patience, of care for the land and its unforgiving beauty. You walk the snow, stretching ahead like a quiet canvas of white, and as the wind settles into a low, steady hum, you find yourself thinking about the stories that cling to these goggles, like frost on fur, because out here in the cold, that seeps into your bones. The Inuit didn't just see snow goggles as a clever tool or a necessity for survival. They carried a deeper weight, too. For some, the goggles weren't just practical, they were protective, not just against the sun's glare, but against forces you couldn't always see. Some believed the goggles had a kind of spiritual power, a quiet magic woven into their carved lines and careful shapes. They weren't just bone and sinew, they were a charm, a safeguard against unseen dangers, a way to shield yourself from not just the blinding light, but from spirits and misfortune that might drift across the tundra on the wind. You imagine slipping on your goggles, feeling the weight of them settle across your face, and sensing a small but steady barrier forming between you and the cold, the blinding sun, and whatever else might be lurking beyond the horizon. A polar bear, yes, a hidden crevasse in the ice maybe, but also something less visible, a bad hunting season perhaps, or a string of accidents that no one can quite explain. There are stories softly spoken, almost whispered over a seal oil lamp at night, of hunters who believed that carving a certain pattern into their goggles could bring good luck. A line etched here, a crosshatch, there a small spiral tucked into the corner. Were these just decorations? Or were they protective symbols? A quiet prayer, etched into bone. Historians still argue about this, and they probably always will. Some say the designs were purely practical, for grip, or for fitting the goggles better against the skin. Others swear they were charms, small gestures of faith in a world that could turn harsh and unforgiving at the blink of an eye. You can almost hear the voice of an elder telling a story to a group of children huddled close for warmth. If you carve a line, just so it confuses the spirits of snow blindness, they might say, their voice low and steady, the edges of the story softening into a lullaby. The children would listen wide-eyed and glance at their own goggles, tracing the lines with their small fingers, wondering if the patterns on theirs were special too. And maybe there's a deeper truth, woven into these stories, a kind of wisdom that modern science doesn't always catch. The goggles protect your eyes, yes, but they also remind you that you're not alone in the world. You're part of a long, unbroken line of survival, of respect for the land and its dangers, of quiet gratitude for the small, ingenious things that keep you alive. As you walk the snow, crunching softly beneath your boots, you feel the bone goggles hugging your face, the sinew snug but gentle, and the quiet presence of those who came before you. Those who carve patterns, not just into the bone, but into the stories that still linger in the cold, waiting to be heard. The wind has calmed for now, and the bone goggles press gently against your skin, the slits narrowing your vision to slim, safe bands of light. As you continue across the snow, your mind drifts to the journey these goggles have taken, not across the tundra, but across time. Imagine an old pair of snow goggles carved from a weathered piece of walrus tusk, resting quietly in a museum display case. The polished bone gleams under the glass, the slits worn smooth from years of use, the sinew ties long gone, perhaps replaced with a modern string for display purposes. A little plaque sits below it, explaining its origin. Inuit snow goggles, 19th century. Function eye protection from snow glare. You pause reading the neat text, and you wonder, does that simple description capture the whole story? The hands that shape the goggles, the knowledge passed down, the windswept hunts, the quiet evenings around the fire. Or does it flatten something beautifully complex into a line of museum speak? Here's the thing. Many of these goggles, these lifelines carved from bone and wood, ended up in museum collections across Europe and North America. They were taken, traded, or donated sometimes with the permission of the original owners, sometimes without. The collectors, fascinated by the curiosities of Arctic life, catalog them like trophies, assigning them labels and placing them on shelves, alongside taxidermy specimens and fragile tools. Historians still debate the ethics of these collections. Some argue that they preserve knowledge without them. Much of the old craftsmanship might have been forgotten. Others point out that removing these objects from their communities also removed the context, the stories, the hands-on learning that made the goggles more than just bone. You can almost picture a museum visitor pausing in front of a display, peering at the goggles behind glass and thinking, they're smaller than I expected. Maybe they marvel at the precision of the slits, or maybe they just move on, not knowing the long hours of carving in the cold, the quiet passing of knowledge from elder to child, or the whispered prayers carved into the lines of the bone. And there's a quirky little detail here that might make you smile. Some early museum catalogers misidentified snow goggles as decorative masks or ritual objects. They didn't understand the practical survival-based brilliance behind the design. It took decades and often the input of Inuit elders and community members to correct these misunderstandings. Even today, some museums still hold snow goggles mislabeled as ceremonial artifacts. You wonder what it would be like to take a pair of those goggles out of the case, to feel the smooth bone in your hands, to tie the sinew across your head and look through the slits at a world of blinding snow? Would the stories come rushing back? The quiet lessons, the shared laughter, the cold pressing in at your cheeks as you learn to see through the glare. The thought lingers as you keep walking. The goggles may have ended up behind glass, but the knowledge they carry that lives on. Every time someone carves a new pair, every time a child slips them on, for the first time, every time you stand beneath the Arctic sun and feel the burn soften into something manageable, the old stories breathe again. The snow stretches endlessly ahead, the cold, a steady, quiet companion at your side, the goggles fitted snugly to your face. Keep the glare at bay, their simple design, still doing the job it was carved for centuries ago. And yet, as you walk, you can't help but think of those who still keep this craft alive today, modern artisans who've picked up the bone and the blade, determined to breathe life back into an old tradition. Imagine it a small workshop tucked away in a northern community, the scent of bone dust in the air, the soft scrape of tools against hard surfaces. A carver, Maybe a descendant of those who first shaped these goggles leans over a piece of antler, carefully sketching the outline for the slits. The sinew is ready, softened, and prepared, and the tools, though perhaps more modern now, are wielded with the same patient care as generations before. It's not just a hobby. For some, it's an act of cultural revival, a way to reconnect with ancestors, to keep the knowledge from slipping through the cracks of time. The modern world moves fast: plastic sunglasses, high-tech gear, synthetic fabrics. But there's something deeply grounding about sitting down to shape a pair of goggles by hand, about feeling the resistance of the bone beneath your blade, the satisfaction of fitting the slits just right, and knowing that when you're done, you'll have created something that works. And here's a fun little twist. Some artisans today are experimenting with new materials, blending tradition with innovation. Acrylic horn, even 3D printed frames, designed in the shape of classic snow goggles. Historians still debate whether these modern twists dilute the original purpose or simply evolve the design for a new age. Is a pair of snow goggles made from plexiglass any less meaningful if it's crafted with the same care and reverence? You hold an imaginary pair in your hands, newly made, yet ancient in spirit. The bone is smooth, the slits cleanly, cut the sinew, tied neatly at the sides. Maybe there's a small pattern etched into the edge, a quiet nod to a family tradition or a particular carver's signature. These aren't just replicas, they're living artifacts, built with the same blend of function and artistry that shaped the originals. And here's the thing that might make you smile. Some of these modern makers are sharing their work on social media, posting photos of their goggles next to the vast Arctic landscape, explaining the process in gentle measured tones, almost like a digital version of an elder's storytelling circle. The knowledge spreads in new ways, now carried by Wi-Fi signals instead of whispers over a seal oil lamp. It's a reminder that traditions aren't frozen in time. They bend, they shift, they adapt, just like the snow, just like the light, just like the people who live in this land of cold and brightness. So you walk your boots, crunching in the snow, the slits in your goggles, narrowing the world to manageable quiet bands of light. The wind hums against the bone, and you feel a little more connected, not just to the past, but to the hands still carving, the story still being told, and the future of a craft that refuses to be forgotten. You keep moving the snow, whispering under your boots, the bone goggles steady against your skin. The Arctic light softens through the slits, and the cold feels less like an enemy and more like an old, slightly grumpy friend who's just part of the journey. But as you walk, a thought creeps in. Will these old designs ever make a comeback? After all, the world is changing fast. Climate change is shifting everything. Melting ice, thinning snow, cover changing animal migration patterns. And with those shifts comes a new kind of glare, a new kind of light, bouncing off surfaces where ice once was. It's the kind of light that burns into your eyes when you least expect it, that sneaks up when you're hunting on thinning sea ice or navigating new routes across the tundra. You wonder if the old ways, the bone goggles, the narrow slits, the careful craftsmanship, might find a new relevance in a world struggling to adapt. It's a curious, almost poetic thought that the wisdom of the past might hold the key to facing the future. Historians, scientists, and community leaders still debate this. Could these goggles, born from a need to survive in a harsh environment, become useful again? As that environment shifts and transforms, there's already a quiet movement in some northern communities to revive traditional skills, not just carving goggles, but sewing sealskin building kajaks and preparing food in ways that honor the old ways. These aren't just hobbies, they're survival strategies, adapted for a world where snowmobiles break down, batteries, freeze, and modern gear isn't always reliable. And there's something deeply satisfying in imagining a young Inuit hunter standing on thinning sea ice, pulling a pair of bone carved goggles from their pack. The sun blazes across the water, glinting off patches of open melt, and the hunter, steady and focused, ties the sinew snug, adjusts the fit, and peers through the slits. A small act, born of ancient knowledge, carried forward into an uncertain future. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some researchers are even studying how the design of Inuit snow goggles could inspire new technologies for reducing glare in extreme environments like space exploration or desert survival gear. The slitted design, so simple and effective, might just outsmart the high-tech gadgets once again. You take a slow breath, the cold sharp in your lungs, and feel a quiet respect for the past. The goggles on your face are more than just bone and sinew. They're a reminder that sometimes the best solutions aren't the newest. They're the ones that have been quietly, patiently refined over centuries, shaped by hands that understood the land in ways a machine never could. So you keep walking the slits, narrowing your world, the snow crunching underfoot, the wind humming at your back, and the thought lingers. Maybe the future looks a lot like the past, if you know how to see it. The wind shifts carrying the faint scent of salt and snow, and as you keep walking, you imagine another scene, an explorer from a far-off land, bundled in unfamiliar gear, stumbling across the ice, squinting in the unrelenting glare. They're not from here, not used to this brightness, not used to the way the light bounces off every surface, doubling back at you from the snow, below the clouds above, and the ice all around. They stop, shielding their eyes with a gloved hand, and you can almost hear the soft chuckle of an Inuit guide beside them. Maybe the guide reaches into their pack, pulls out a pair of bone goggles, and hands them over, without a word, the sinew ties trailing like the ends of a ribbon. The explorer hesitates awkwardly, turning the goggles over in their hands, unsure what to make of this strange ancient design. But when they slip them on, that's the moment. The world shifts. The blinding snow dims, the harsh light softens, and suddenly they can see again. The gentle dip of a snowdrift, the dark speck of a distant seal, the faint rhythmic rise of an ice floe in the water. You smile, picturing the explorer's reaction, a mix of surprise and relief. Maybe they nod in thanks. Maybe they're too embarrassed to admit they were blinded before. Either way, it's a moment of quiet understanding. Technology doesn't always mean new. Sometimes, the simplest solutions, the ones shaped by the land itself, are the best. Historians still argue about when this moment first happened. Was it in the 1500s, when European ships stumbled into Arctic waters, desperately seeking the Northwest Passage? Was it later with fur traders and whalers, who marveled at the locals' ability to thrive in a place where they barely survived? There's no single answer, just a scattering of accounts, half-remembered stories and sketches in worn journals that hint at a world both alien and familiar. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some explorers were so taken with the snow goggles that they tried to bring them back to Europe, hoping to impress friends and colleagues with this strange artifact from the frozen world. But without the context, without the cold, biting at their faces and the sun burning into their eyes, the goggles became little more than curiosities, objects of fascination, rather than tools of survival. You adjust your own goggles, the sinew snug across the back of your head, and you think about how knowledge travels, how it can be shared in a quiet gesture, a pair of goggles handed over a nod of understanding, a demonstration of how to tie the knots. Just so. The explorer might not have known it then, but in the small, shared moment, they were touching a thread of knowledge that had been passed down for generations across the ice, through the wind, under the endless Arctic sun. And maybe, just maybe, they walked away a little wiser for it. You keep moving the snow, crunching beneath your boots, the cold sharp against your skin, and the world narrowed by the slits of the goggles, a world both ancient and alive in your hands. You press forward the snow, groaning softly beneath each step, and as the horizon wavers in the silvery light, a thought lingers. Where do we go from here? What's the future of eye protection in a world that's changing so fast? It's a curious thing, how much we still owe to those old, humble snow goggles. Think about it, the sleek sunglasses you might wear on a sunny beach, the mirrored ski goggles you strap on before carving down a slope, the polarized lenses that cut glare on a fishing trip. All of these trace their roots, in some quiet way, back to the bone goggles of the Inuit. They may not look the same, but the principle is the same. Protect your eyes from too much light. Narrow the field of vision. Filter the glare and keep the world manageable when the sun is too much. Some designers even admit it outright, how they look at the past for inspiration, how the simple lines of a slit and bone sparked ideas for new gear. And here's the fun part, the very idea of reducing light by narrowing an aperture, not by filtering it, has found its way into some surprising places. Think of camera pinholes, certain kinds of safety visors, and even experimental helmets for astronauts. Historians still debate just how directly the Inuit goggles influenced modern designs. But the echoes are there, whether in the lines of a ski mask or the shadow of a racing visor. It's not just about form, it's about philosophy. The Inuit understood that sometimes less is more, that narrowing the light, focusing the field of vision makes it easier to see what matters, that when you block out the glare, the small important details stand out. The seal's breathing hole, the ripple in the snow, the flicker of a distant movement. You wonder how many more of the world's great inventions started this way. Small local solutions shaped by necessity, carried by the wind, across time, picked up by those who saw the quiet genius in a simple idea. Here's a quirky little thought for you. Imagine an Inuit carver centuries ago, carefully shaping a pair of goggles for a young hunter. Now picture a modern engineer, sitting in a sleek office, sketching a design for a pair of high-performance sunglasses. Different worlds, different tools, but maybe the same quiet thought. How do I help someone see any place where the light tries to take that away? You adjust the goggles on your face, the slits, narrowing the world into manageable slivers, and you feel a quiet respect for those who carved the path you're walking now. The future may bring new materials, new techniques, even new challenges, but the core problem remains the same. How to see, and how to see well, when the world shines too bright. So you keep moving forward, the snow crunching beneath your boots, the wind humming softly in your ears, and the bone goggles snug against your face. They've been here a long time, and maybe, just maybe, they'll be here for a while. Yet, the snow stretches out like an endless blanket, shimmering faintly under the low Arctic sun. Your goggles, carved with care and worn with pride, narrow the world into a pair of dark slits, guiding your gaze toward the horizon. The wind whispers past, and you take a slow, steady breath, feeling the cold air fill your lungs. You close your eyes for a moment, and a scene flickers into focus. Behind your eyelids, quiet, almost dreamlike. A carver sits cross-legged in the snow, the bone in their hands as familiar as the wind on their face. They shape scrape and smooth the sound of their blade, soft against the bone, the rhythm of their work, as steady as the waves beneath the ice. The slits are measured carefully, each one a decision. How wide, how narrow, how close together. The carver tests the fit against their own face, then holds the goggles up to the light, turning them slowly, the bone catching the sun, in thin pale lines. A child watches wide-eyed, their breath puffing in the cold air. The carver smiles, beckons them closer, and places the goggles gently over the child's face. Look, they say, their voice low, steady and kind. The child blinks, then looks out across the snowfield, their vision sharpened. The glare softened the world, suddenly less blinding and more manageable. The child grins a toothy, gap-toothed smile, and the carver nods satisfied. The lesson has begun. You open your eyes and step forward, feeling the crunch of snow beneath your boots. The gentle tug of the sinew straps the soft, smooth weight of the bone against your face. The wind carries the scent of salt and snow and something faintly organic. Maybe seal, fat, maybe tanned hide, maybe just the memory of those who came before you. The sun hangs low in the sky, casting long, thin shadows across the white. You tilt your head, peering through the slits, and the world feels almost peaceful, now sharp, but not overwhelming. The snowdrifts curve softly, the ice glints faintly, and far in the distance, a shape moves, a seal perhaps, or maybe just a trick of the light. The goggles don't just protect your eyes, they focus you. They teach you to look slowly, carefully, to notice the small, important things in a landscape that can seem vast and unforgiving. They are a reminder that sometimes the best solutions are born not from complexity, but from careful, quiet observation. You take one last slow breath, feeling the cold fill your lungs, and you smile a little. The goggles are old. The design is simple, but they work, and that's what matters. You adjust the sinew strap, tugging it snug behind your head, and step forward into the snow. The bone, warm against your skin, the slits narrowing your gaze. The wind, humming softly in your ears. And as you walk, you carry with you the quiet wisdom of generations. The carvers, the hunters, the storytellers, and the children who learn to see, not just with their eyes, but with their hearts and hands, in a land where survival is carved from bone and softened by snow. So now, as the snow settles softly and the wind hushes into a gentle whisper, you let yourself relax. Your body, heavy with the weight of the long walk, feels warm beneath your layers. The bone goggles still snug against your face. The cold no longer feels sharp. It's a quiet, steady presence, like a blanket of frost laid gently across the land. The light filtered through the narrow slits seems softer now, the sharp glare dulled into a faint glow that flickers at the edges of your vision. You let your breath slow the sound of your boots, fading into the soft crunch of the snow. The world narrows into quiet shapes and muted lines. The Arctic vastness held in the simple, beautiful design of the goggles resting against your skin. You feel the faint tug of the sinew, straps the smooth polished edge of bone against your cheek, and the warmth of the knowledge passed down through so many hands before you. Your footsteps grow slower, each one a little lighter, until you feel as though you're drifting more than walking. The snow stretches out like a soft, endless blanket, and you feel a sense of quiet, belonging in its gentle folds. The sound of the wind fades into the background, replaced by the rhythmic hush of your own breath. And as your eyes drift close, you carry with you the soft memory of carved bone, the wisdom of generations, and the quiet, focused vision that sees not just the snow, but the story beneath it, Sleep well, my friend. The Arctic light will be waiting for you when you wake.